And this will be part of the recording, so we're just excited about this, guys. Happy New Year to everybody.
Welcome to 2018. I don't know if you guys are excited, but I am. I remember back in the day in the 90s, we watched, what was it, Back to the Future, and in the future was, I think, 2017. And so we're officially beyond the future right now, which is crazy.
That is exciting. I did not think about it like that, but I am super glad you've enlightened us.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
So we got a total of
I'm
51 right now.
What type of diabetes are you living with? There we go. Load the poll. You guys can vote so we can see who's with us tonight.
Yep. We're super excited to be here with you guys today. So there's a total of 1,011 people that registered for tonight's webinar, which is I love to see quadruple digit numbers when it comes to webinar registration. So we're expecting probably about 250, 300 people to show up to the room today. And we really appreciate you guys registering and taking your time to watch this presentation, because we're going to share with you some really awesome information. There's a lot of misconception in the world of diabetes, as you probably already know. And we're here to try and clear up that confusion, because it's a zoo, it's a circus. And we like circuses, but not when it comes to actual disease prevention. So as you can see, Robbie put he launched a poll which says, what type of diabetes are you living with? So if you can see that poll, vote on it, because we always like to see who's in the room.
Yeah, and I see people are also letting us know where they're from, so that's great. Let us know where you're from. I'm coming to you from Santa Monica, California. And Cyrus is in Costa Rica.
That's right. I am. My wife Kylie and I are currently in the Guanacaste region of Costa Rica. Funny story. We were just in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia for approximately a month, for the month of December. We leave Costa Rica. It's like 82 degrees. We get on a plane. We fly. We land in Washington, D.C. For about a month, it was like, I don't know, 18 degrees, 20 degrees, sometimes as low as 6. And we get on a plane to fly back here. It was 14 degrees when we left JFK. And when we arrived here, it was 74 degrees. So we're happy to be back in. I haven't worn that much clothing in years.
I think we both feel for all of you who are living in cold climates. You know, it's a challenge.
Absolutely. A little rough.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so it looks like we have about 60% of people in the room right now are living with type 2 diabetes. And then approximately 12-ish% of you guys are living with type 1, such as, or like Robbie and myself. And then, about 10% of you either don't have diabetes or have a loved one with diabetes. So we always love to see people supporting others. That's fantastic. And predominantly a room with type 2s. So we're going to be talking a lot about type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes and how you can actually reverse it. Yes, I said reverse type 2 diabetes. It's possible. We see it all the time. And I want to show you exactly how you can make that happen in your life.
Totally.
So continue writing in the chat box. Where are you from and what type of diabetes are you living with? And then maybe in like 2 minutes or so, we'll go straight into the presentation and we'll give you guys, some insight here on how you can get your best A1c without too much hoopla.
Yeah, and I saw, a lot of people text messaging us. I enjoyed going through those and replying to people over the course of this week, and saw some people with some higher A1C. So we're really, really excited to show you how you can lower that A1C. So it's going to be fun. It's just really, really important information, and it's going to have a profound impact in your life.
100%. By the way, if you are having a difficult time hearing, or if you're having a difficult time seeing, all you got to do is log out completely and then come back in. So get out and come right back in, and then it should usually make the connection better. So if you're having a difficult time hearing or seeing right now, get out, right back in, and we'll be going. All right, Robbie, what do you think? We got 253 people live right now. Should we just get into it?
Let's do it. Let's go.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we're going to go right into the presentation. So how to get your best A1C in the next 60 days. Can you see my screen?
Sure can. It looks great.
All right, so how to get your best A1C in the next 60 days. And this is for people living with all forms of diabetes, whether you have type 1, type 1.5, prediabetes, or type 2. Here's what we're going to cover today. We'll cover 4 main concepts. Number 1, why are low carbohydrates dangerous? Okay, you may have heard that low carbohydrate diets are the only way that you can control your blood glucose. We're going to show you why that's actually not the case. Number 2, we're going to talk about carbohydrate-rich foods like bananas and quinoa and brown rice and potatoes, and try and figure out, is eating those foods actually going to spike your blood glucose or not? Number 3, we're going to talk about the glycemic index. Is the glycemic index important? Because we've been told that it is, but it actually turns out that it may or may not be as important as you think. And then number 4, we're going to talk about insulin. Does insulin cause weight gain? That's another very pervasive concept in the world of diabetes, and it is true and not true at the same time. So we'll go into it in detail. Couple of reasons why you should stay until the end. Number 1, we're going to teach you a super effective system for controlling your blood glucose today, tomorrow, and for the rest of your life. We've literally worked with over 1,250 people and shown a lot of people how to get tremendous success. And we want to show you that system. Number 2, we're going to show you how you can lose weight without even trying. Sounds bonkers, but it's true. Number 3, we're going to show you how you can gain tons of energy simply by changing the foods that are going into your mouth. And then we're also going to show you our coaching program. We'd love to show you our coaching program. And as we're constantly improving it, and right now it is as comprehensive as it has ever been, and it is as affordable as it has ever been. So I want to tell you guys all about it. Okay, in the chat box, answer these 2 questions for us right now. Number 1, what is your biggest frustration living with diabetes? Okay, in other words, why are you attending this webinar? My gut tells me that you're probably frustrated or confused about something related to diabetes, and if so, please enter it in the chat box. And then number 2, yes or no, are you ready to make some serious positive change? Okay, so let's see what those answers look like in the chat box, and then we can move on. So I see a lot of things like I can't lose weight, I'm having nighttime lows, I'm addicted to food, frustration, controlling my blood glucose, I don't know what to eat, my fasting blood glucose is super high, I'm dizzy all the time, I wish I could get my blood glucose numbers lower, especially my fasting blood glucose. Can't lose weight. My weight is staying on me. Carb counting is difficult and hard. I'm feeling numbness and tingling, peripheral neuropathy. My blood glucose is all over the place. There's no blood glucose stability. That's a big one, blood glucose stability. I'm always hungry, and I don't know how to drop my A1C. Okay, perfect. So there's a lot of really good juicy nuggets in there, because the frustrations that you guys are expressing are frustrations that are very common in the world of diabetes, regardless of the type of diabetes you're talking about. Okay, here are some common struggles that we see over and over and over again. Number 1, controlling your blood glucose seems like an impossible task. Number 2, losing weight is extremely challenging. In fact, it's so challenging that you've been trying sometimes for days, months, weeks, even years, and still can't lose weight. Number 3, we hear from a lot of people that they have poor digestion. They either have gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea. Something is the problem, and their digestion is taking a hit. Number 4, this is very common. Energy levels have gone down over time. We hear low energy, low energy, low energy, more than you could believe. Number 5, your A1C value is high and you're frustrated. You don't know what it is that you can do to lower your blood glucose because you've been told a number of different things and you feel like you've tried everything under the sun, and yet your A1C still remains high. So if you resonate with any of these struggles that you see right here on the screen, don't worry, you're totally normal, and the beauty is that there's actually a really elegant and very simple solution. Okay? Another one is that your doctor doesn't give you good guidance. This is something that we hear from people over and over again, that every time you go to the doctor, your doctor just pushes more pills on top of you, more medication, as if that's the answer to long-term metabolic health. Let me give you a little intro. Some of you guys know me. Some of you guys don't know me. My name is Cyrus. I was diagnosed with 3 autoimmune conditions in my senior year of college. Yes, I was 22 years old. I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, followed by alopecia universalis, which is why I have no hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes, no armpit hair, no nose hair, no ear hair, nothing. And then within 6 months, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I was a senior at Stanford. I was really, really scared that something terribly wrong was happening with my health. So my doctors at that time, they told me to eat a low carbohydrate diet. So I started to eat the foods you see on the screen: cheese, butter, eggs, bacon, more meat. And growing up, I used to love eating these foods. So telling me at the age of 22 that the way to handle diabetes is by eating more eggs and by eating more red meat, that was the greatest prescription I'd ever heard in my life. The problem was that it didn't work. And no matter how hard I tried, my blood glucose just became a random number generator. I would see numbers like this you see on the screen, 284, just any time of day, any day of the week. My blood glucose could either be a 40 or a 340, and I had no control. And in addition to that, my exercise, my ability to move my body was severely compromised. And growing up as an athlete, I loved to move my body. And when exercise became difficult, that was the last straw for me. So after a year, I started researching a bunch of information online, and I found a nutritionist who was very well-versed in diabetes. And he taught me how to transition to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. So I started to eat the foods that you see on the screen here. Lots of color, lots of fruits, lots of vegetables. In the span of a few weeks, I increased my carbohydrate intake from about 100-ish grams per day all the way upwards of 600 grams per day. So I significantly increased my carbohydrate intake, and I was nervous that my insulin use would also go up because that's what the doctors told me was going to happen. But the exact opposite happened, okay? So you see here in blue, this is my carbohydrate intake. At the same time, my fat intake significantly dropped. So my fat intake is shown here in red. So I was eating more carbohydrate-rich foods at the expense of less fat-rich foods. And my insulin fell. My insulin came down by 43% in the first 3 weeks. So something didn't make sense to me because I was eating more carbohydrate and more glucose-rich foods, and yet my insulin use was coming down. So that's the first time when I started to recognize that my insulin use, shown here in yellow or orange, closely resembled my fat intake. So I said, wait a minute, hold on, I'm eating less fat and now I'm using less insulin. That seems incredibly interesting to me because nobody has told me this up to this point. So this traditional model of carbohydrate metabolism tells you that, you know, when you eat carbohydrate, that's going to lead to insulin use, right? That's what low carbohydrate diets are all about. Eat less carbohydrate. Don't eat carbs. Carbs are bad for you. Carbs will make you fat. Carbs will give you diabetes. Carbs will increase your A1c value, okay? So I fed into that methodology, right? And I said, okay, fine, let me decrease my carbohydrate intake. But yet now I was decreasing my fat intake for the first time ever, and I was using less insulin, which was ridiculously, it was a very eye-opening process for me at a very young age. So I put myself back to school. I went and got a PhD in nutritional biochemistry at UC Berkeley. There I studied for 5 years, and I read more than 3,000 scientific papers on diabetes. And no, that is not a typo, and I'm not exaggerating. I read everything under the sun to try and understand what causes diabetes, what causes prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and how can you actually control blood glucose. And I wrote a thesis on the causes and the effects of insulin resistance. And here we are today, 15 years after I was diagnosed. On a daily basis, I eat more than 900 grams of carbohydrate per day. Again, that's not a typo. I'm eating almost 1,000 grams of carbohydrate per day, which is It's that most people with diabetes won't eat that either in a week or a month, and I eat that on a daily basis, and yet my insulin use still remains incredibly low. And my A1c is usually between 5.4 and 5.7 on a daily basis. So that's my story, and now I'll turn it over to Robbie.
All right, guys. So my name is Robbie Barbero. Some people know me as Mindful Diabetic Robbie on social media, where I love to share this lifestyle. Just super passionate about sharing the results that I've had so other people can experience it as well. So just like Cyrus, I'm living with type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed when I was 12, and at that time, I was following the standard American diet, which led to several health problems, including terrible allergies all the time. So I took allergy medications like Claritin D and Nasonex pretty much year-round. I had terrible acne and had to get a lot of treatments for that, tried everything under the sun, including Accutane, which is one of the most serious drugs you can possibly take. And I also had plantar fasciitis, so I wore these big blue boots at night, which was super uncomfortable and just not fun. So, of course, being a type A person, I started doing some Googling and learning and reading books, and I came across the low carbohydrate diet. So I was a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and this is an organization telling people to, limit their fruit, it's too high in sugar, and really get energy from grass-fed beef and raw milk. So I tried that. And it didn't go so well, so I ended up learning about trying a low-carb, plant-based way of eating. So I followed Gabriel Cousens' teachings and was eating a lot of olive oil, nuts, nut butters, salads, and this was not good. I was on campus at the University of Florida at the time, and I had low energy. I was blacked out several times. And at this point, I'm pretty scared. I don't really know what to do next. So over the years, I had worked with a naturopath, and I went back to her being, okay, what can I try next? There was more supplements, and the big thing was to try chelation therapy, which was going to be expensive and require me to drive quite far to make it work. And I was really considering it. But before that, I actually heard a podcast, and this podcast changed my life. I signed up with a nutrition coach, which just absolutely changed my life. So I signed up for a coaching program. I learned how to follow a low-fat, plant-based diet, and it was incredible. So now I get to start eating foods that I love while doing this diet. So I get to eat mangoes, persimmons, bananas. I mean, you name it. I love fruit. So I got my energy back. I saw my insulin sensitivity go through the roof. I mean, the amount of carbohydrates I could eat and the insulin I needed was just blowing my mind. And I started feeling amazing, my quality of life. I mean, that was the most important thing for me. Now it's over 10 years later, and after that, I'm eating nothing but fruits and vegetables for over 10 years. I've never had an A1c above 6.6, and I'm active every day. And like I said, I just feel amazing. The quality of life is through the roof, and I just love sharing it with other people.
All right. So now that you know who Robbie and myself are, let's get into the actual presentation. This is the meat of the presentation, pun intended. Okay, here we go. Question number 1. Are low carbohydrate diets the optimal way to control your blood glucose? Let's find out, okay? Over the course of time, low carbohydrate diets have been called by many names. There's just many different versions of low carbohydrate diet. Back in the 70s, Atkins was the first one to create the low carbohydrate revolution. It got reinvented back in the 90s and became super popular. From that point, the South Beach diet took over, then the Zone diet, then the paleo revolution in the early 2000s, and now the ketogenic diet, okay? Dr. Bernstein has written a book called The Diabetes Solution. We respect Dr. Bernstein greatly. However, the information that's presented in that book is all about low carbohydrate diets, and we'll tell you exactly why there's some limitations to that approach, okay? So low carbohydrate diets are, by definition, high fat and high protein diets. I will repeat that. Low carbohydrate diets are, by definition, high in fat and high in protein. And because on a low carbohydrate diet, you are avoiding consuming carbohydrates, as a result of that, you can end up with a lot of short-term metabolic improvements, including what you see on the screen. You can get rapid weight loss. In a very short period of time, you can lose tremendous amounts of weight. Okay, low carbohydrate diets also can flatline your blood glucose. Again, because you're avoiding the consumption of carbohydrate-rich foods. You can also lower your A1c, you can lower your insulin use, you can lower your total cholesterol, you can lower your LDL cholesterol, and you can lower your triglycerides. All of that is likely to happen in the short term. So if you've adopted a low carbohydrate diet and you start to see all these improvements, then you might think to yourself, well, great, I guess I solved the problem. Problem solved. There's nothing else to worry about, right? The problem is that ketogenic diets and low carbohydrate diets in general, they have a laundry list of long-term complications, which you don't see in the short term. In the short term, everything looks like it's going well, but in the long term, you end up with much, much bigger issues. So here you go. So here's some studies that show you that low carbohydrate diets increase your risk for what's called all-cause mortality, which is a fancy super nerd way of saying premature death. People who consume low carbohydrate diets are at an increased risk for death. So you can see here highlighted in yellow, low carbohydrate diet based on animal-based sources was associated with higher all-cause mortality in both men and women. Okay, these studies are done in large groups of people over long periods of time. Another study, this is a meta-analysis, analyzing more than 272,000 people. Okay, what they find is that the risk of all-cause mortality among those with high low carbohydrate scores or those who are eating low carbohydrate diets is significantly elevated. Okay, again, this was done by Dr. Walter Willett at Harvard. He's one of the most well-known researchers in this field, and Dr. Walter Longo, who we're actually interviewing for our summit coming up in February. Okay, what they show is that, again, when you consume high animal protein diets, it increases your risk for cardiovascular mortality and it increases your risk for all-cause mortality. So it's really important to understand that you can't necessarily eat more fat-rich and protein-rich foods for free, especially if they're coming from animal-based sources. Okay, another article written by Walter Longo, again at USC, shows that people who consume the lowest protein in their diet are at the lowest risk for the development of diabetes. Okay, so here he says, among subjects with no diabetes at baseline, those who ate the most protein had a 73-fold increase in their risk for diabetes, while those in the moderate protein category had a 23-fold increase in their risk for diabetes. So what that means is that whether you're eating a high amount of protein or a medium amount of protein, your risk for death is increased. If you eat a low amount of protein, okay, that is what's going to actually reduce your overall disease risk and your risk of dying prematurely. So again, in the short term, you see all of these metabolic improvements right here: weight loss, reduced glucose variability, lower A1c, lower total insulin use, reduced cholesterol, reduced triglycerides. But in the long term, this is what happens. You increase your risk for all cardiovascular disease: hypertension, high LDL, increased triglycerides, increased atherosclerosis, which is the hardening of blood vessels. You also increase your risk for insulin resistance, and we're going to go into that in a lot of detail in the next section. You increase your risk for fatty liver, which is a very challenging problem. You become inflamed. You increase your risk for the development of cancer, kidney failure, and you increase your risk for total body inflammation, which can set the stage for autoimmune conditions. And in addition to that, in the long term, low carbohydrate diets can significantly significantly decrease your energy levels. It can make it very challenging to lose weight. It can significantly impair your digestion, leading to, like I said earlier, gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, or abdominal pain. And people on low carbohydrate diets end up with very intense food cravings that can sometimes take over their entire mental faculties. So here's a perfect example. This is an example of somebody who came through our coaching program who was consuming a low carbohydrate diet. So she was eating a low carbohydrate diet, unaware that all of these risks were at play. And she went from consuming 30 grams of carbohydrate on a daily basis, which is a very small amount, all the way upwards of 500 grams of carbohydrate per day. Now, Patricia is living with type 1.5 diabetes, or adult version of type 1. And despite the fact that she increased her carbohydrate intake by almost 20-fold, her insulin use came down and her A1c fell. And on top of that, she lost 42 pounds. So she's eating more carbohydrate, she's losing weight, she's dropping her A1c, and she's dropping her insulin use. Okay? So carbohydrate-rich foods will spike your blood glucose, true or false. Okay? This is something that if you go onto the internet and you look at anything related to diabetes, chances are you'll run across some information about the fact that carbohydrates are bad for you. And like I said earlier, they're going to make you fat and they're going to spike your blood glucose. And as a result of that, you should avoid all carbohydrate-rich foods. Okay? The answer is this. Carbohydrate-rich foods will spike your blood glucose if and only if you are insulin resistant. That is very important to understand, okay? Carbohydrate-rich foods will spike your blood glucose. They absolutely will, if and only if you are living with insulin resistance. So let's go into detail about what insulin resistance actually is, okay? Insulin resistance is caused by the storage of fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat. Now, I tell people this all the time. If you have a piece of paper in front of you and a pen, I want you to write this down right now. Insulin resistance is caused by the storage of fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat. If you remember nothing from this webinar except one thing, please make it be this. Okay? The storage of fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat, that is the problem. So your two chief tissues in your body that are affected the most by increasing fat intake in your diet are number one, your muscle, and number two, your liver. When these two tissues accumulate fat, that causes insulin resistance. So here's how this works. In a normal state of what's called normal glucose metabolism, when you're not at risk for insulin resistance or diabetes, glucose is floating in your blood that's shown right here in blue. In order for glucose to get inside of either your liver or your muscle, insulin is required. So insulin is shown right here in green. So insulin signals to the tissue to allow glucose to enter. So when that happens, the blue glucose can get inside of your liver, and your liver can end up storing large amounts of glucose. The same thing happens inside of your muscle. Insulin signals to the muscle tissue and says, hey, I got some glucose. Do you want to take it up? And glucose then marches its way into the tissue and actually gets stored and burned for energy, both in your muscle and in your liver. Now, if we throw another variable into the picture, okay, we throw fatty acids, okay? So I wrote down here the ketogenic diet, but this is actually low carbohydrate diets in general. The ketogenic diet just being one of those. So on a ketogenic diet or a low carbohydrate diet, you end up consuming a lot of fatty acids because, again, low carbohydrate diets are high fat diets by definition. So you increase your intake of fatty acids, which then partitions these fatty acids into multiple tissues. So these fatty acids get inside of your muscle. These fatty acids get inside of your adipose tissue, which is your fat tissue. And these fatty acids end up inside of your liver. So over the course of time, you end up with this picture. Fatty acids get shoved into your muscle and into your liver, and both of them end up accumulating more yellow. Now, in this state, when both your muscle and your liver have accumulated a significant amount of fatty acids, when you go and eat a banana or a potato or a piece of squash or maybe some corn, and insulin is required to get that glucose into your muscle and into your liver, insulin cannot do its job nearly as well because there's so much yellow or so much fat that's already taken residence inside of your muscle and inside of your liver. So insulin tries to get glucose out of your blood, but it fails. And so as a result of this, glucose stays in your blood and it gets trapped. And over the course of time, you end up getting more and more glucose trapped inside of your blood because it cannot leave. So as a result, your pancreas starts to make more insulin. Your pancreas says, look, I can overpower this situation. All I got to do is throw more insulin into the picture. So your pancreas starts to over-secrete insulin. And now you're in a situation where you have excess glucose floating in your blood, leading to high blood glucose, and excess insulin inside of your blood, which is called hyperinsulinemia. And you have excess fatty acids because you're eating them at the expense of carbohydrate. So what happens here? You end up with what's called atherosclerotic plaque. So this atherosclerotic plaque ends up building up on the inside of blood vessels. Okay, this is caused by excess accumulation of fatty acids and, most importantly, cholesterol. And these atherosclerotic plaque regions can cause significant damage, and they can increase your risk for cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and a heart attack. So in this situation, you end up with atherosclerosis, which is the hardening of blood vessels, and liver insulin resistance, and muscle insulin resistance. It's a triple whammy. Now, when you consume a low-fat diet, which we're going to go into a little bit more detail about in a little bit, here's how a low-fat diet differs. Again, small amounts of fatty acids are present from your diet, and therefore small amounts of fatty acids accumulate inside of your muscle and inside of your liver. Now, because there's only a small amount of fatty acids in both of these tissues, when you eat a banana or a potato or some squash or some corn, this insulin knocks on the door, says, hey, knock, knock, do you want this glucose? And the glucose says, and the tissues say, sure, I'd love it. Bring it on inside. So glucose then exits your blood and ends up inside of both your muscle and inside of your liver. So over the course of time, you end up accumulating more blue and less yellow, more glucose and less fatty acids. This is what happens on a low-fat diet, and this keeps glucose out of your blood and keeps your blood glucose value nice and low. So this leads to what's called an elastic vasculature, which is the opposite of atherosclerosis. This is how blood vessels are supposed to be, nice and elastic so they can dilate and contract when necessary. You also end up with an insulin-sensitive liver, and you also end up with an insulin-sensitive muscle, which is code for tissues that are capable of responding to insulin. That's all insulin sensitivity means. So again, the accumulation of fat in your muscle and your liver literally traps glucose inside of your blood. And unless you fundamentally understand that fat has a negative consequence, okay, that excess fat, let me back up, excess fat has a negative consequence on your ability to regulate your blood glucose. This is the most fundamental take-home message that you can learn from today's webinar and in your life living with diabetes. Okay, concept number 3, the glycemic index. Okay, is the glycemic index important? Okay, the glycemic index is important if and only if you are living with insulin resistance. Okay, so let me back up here. I'm just going to go backwards on my slides again. If you have an insulin-sensitive muscle and if you have an insulin-sensitive liver, then large amounts of glucose can enter both of these tissues. It's really not an issue. So eating high glycemic foods is less and less of a problem because the glucose from those high glycemic foods, whether they're potatoes or oranges or mangoes or bananas or persimmons, those high glycemic foods don't pose much of a problem because there's no resistance, there's no blocking of getting inside of your muscle and your liver. But if you're living with insulin resistance, let me back up one more time here. Okay, if you're living with insulin resistance, now you run into a problem where the blue cannot get inside, and as a result of that, anytime you're putting more blue into the system, or anytime you're eating high glycemic fruits and vegetables, you end up with problems because those high glycemic fruits and vegetables cannot get fully metabolized. Okay? So again, the glycemic index is important if and only if you're living with insulin resistance. In order to get to a point where you can consume high glycemic index foods, the way to do that is to actually make yourself insulin sensitive. And you can do that, but again, by adopting a low-fat, plant-based, whole food approach. Perfect example, Lindsay Garcia. Okay, Lindsay, she's been working with us now for over a year and a half. She started with a carbohydrate intake of about 175 grams a day and an A1c of about 7.2. And she said, you know what, guys, I'm sick of this. I'm fed up of living with a high A1c. I want to drop it. How do I do that? So we showed her the low-fat, plant-based whole food approach. And in the process, what she was able to do is increase her carbohydrate intake from about 175 to about 500 grams a day. She lost 17 pounds, and her A1c dropped. So she's eating, just like Patricia earlier, she's eating more carbohydrate with a lower A1c and a lower total daily dose of insulin. In addition to that, her cholesterol dropped. She's been living with high uric cholesterol for a long period of time. And she finally was able to drop her cholesterol level again by decreasing her total fat intake and migrating for a plant-based whole food diet. Now, you can see here in this picture, she's eating very high glycemic foods. She eats very large mangoes, she eats bananas, she eats figs, she eats persimmons because she loves them, and she's worked hard to get to a point where her carbohydrate metabolism is in top shape. And as a result of that, these high carbohydrate, high glycemic index foods just don't pose a problem for her nearly as much as they used to. Okay, concept number 4, insulin causes weight gain. Okay, you've probably heard this before, that, you know, if you're injecting insulin, you're going to gain weight. Or if you're over-secreting insulin, you're going to gain weight. Okay, this is true and not true. It is true if and only if you're living with insulin resistance. So I think you can see a theme at this point, right? Insulin resistance is this, it's the underlying chronic metabolic disease that it elevates your risk for all other chronic diseases. And gaining weight is no exception to that rule. So if you're living with insulin resistance, like we saw earlier, you end up trapping glucose in your blood, trapping fatty acids inside of your vasculature. You end up trapping fatty acids inside of your muscle and liver, and you end up trapping fatty acids inside of your adipose tissue. So an increased consumption of high-fat, high-protein foods over time makes it so that your pancreas has to over-secrete insulin. So the take-home message here is that insulin itself is not the enemy. Insulin never was the enemy. Insulin never will be the enemy. Okay, your dog secretes insulin. Raccoons secrete insulin. Mice secrete insulin. Okay, insulin is a required biological hormone for life. If any animal loses its ability to secrete insulin, it will die. It'll die in a very short period of time. That's why living with type 1 diabetes is very important to monitor your total health, because if you get to a point where you have zero insulin production, it is not compatible with living. Point being is that insulin itself is not the enemy. It's a required critical biological hormone. The problem is that when you over-secrete insulin, that's when you lead to problems like weight gain and heart disease and atherosclerosis. So here's another perfect example. Carrie, she came to us about a year ago, and she was experiencing, she had been overweight for a long period of time. So you can see here on this sort of bottom right picture where she had just kind of gained weight and gained weight and gained weight over the course of time, and she could not figure out how to lose weight. So we showed her low-fat, plant-based whole food nutrition, okay? She was able to drop her A1c from 6.8 down to 5.3. This is non-diabetic. Technically speaking, Carrie no longer lives with diabetes. She takes zero medication and she regulates her blood glucose completely through food. And she was able to drop her A1c into the normal range and get it below the pre-diabetic threshold simply by changing the foods and going to her mouth. She's lost more than 56 pounds at this point. And now she's capable of exercising for 30 to 45 minutes every single day because she can move her body for the first time in a long time. So this is another perfect example of a woman who was over-secreting insulin at the very beginning of this process. Her pancreas was cranking out lots of insulin to overcome total body insulin resistance. And now as she's lost weight, she's actually relieved the stress on her pancreas, and now she's capable of losing weight even though her pancreas is still making insulin. So here's the question for you guys. Would you guys like to learn about our coaching program? Because we'd love to tell you about it if you guys want to hear about it. So in the chat box, can you please write the word yes if you want to learn about it?
Please, yeah, let us know that. You're still here with us. And hopefully you have absorbed this information. Here we go. I'm seeing some yeses coming in. I hope my audio is okay. If there's any problem with my audio, let me know.
Yeah, we got you. Good. Sound good.
All right. Yes, we got a heck yes. We got a flood of yeses. Terrific. All right. So let's get into it. So we have the world's first online coaching program designed to teach you how to maximize your insulin sensitivity using low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition. So this is accessible from anybody, anywhere in the world. So what does this food look like? So you saw Cyrus go through the science and what's going on, but what does it actually look like? What do you put in your mouth to reverse insulin resistance? And if you look at this picture here, it's vibrant, colorful, delicious food. You know, one of our mentors, Dr. McDougall, calls this stuff comfort food, things that people love and enjoy. But people living with diabetes are told you can't have this stuff. And we're going to explain to you exactly, why that's not the case. Okay, so let's go through this little exercise here. We put foods into green light, yellow light, and red light foods. So it's very clear, you know exactly what to eat to reverse insulin resistance. So in the green light category, these are foods that you literally can eat as much as you want. So as much as until you feel comfortably satiated, you get to eat these foods. So we're talking fruits, non-starchy vegetables. So that's like cauliflower, eggplant, super healthy foods. Starchy vegetables, we're talking potatoes. Yes, potatoes, yams. These are foods that are high in carbohydrate, but full of fiber, water, vitamins, minerals, lots of nutrition. Beans, lentils, and peas. Okay, these are whole foods. Amazing, amazing nutritional powerhouses there. Green leafy vegetables, we're talking like lettuce, arugula, collard greens, intact whole grains. The word intact is very important there. And herbs and spices. It's all the stuff that you can eat as much as you want. And there's a wide variety in those categories of food. Now, the yellow light foods. These are foods that you want to limit. So I'm not saying you can never have these to reverse insulin resistance, but you got to be careful with how much of these you're eating. So nuts, seeds, avocados, coconut meat, olives. These are foods that they're whole foods. They are plant-based. They're whole, but they're very high in fat. So you can't eat too much of them. You can't have unlimited quantities if you want to reverse insulin resistance. Now, pastas, these are more processed foods. That becomes a little bit of a problem. So these days, you can get bean pastas. And that's healthy. It's a good option. It can be part of a program. But it's better to eat the whole beans. Same thing with breads. Whatever the bread was made out of, even if it's sprouted bread, it's still better to eat the intact whole grain that product was originally made out of. Okay, so let's go through the red light. So these are the foods you really are best to completely avoid and eliminate from your diet. So dairy products, eggs, red and white meat, fish and shellfish, oils of any kind. Doesn't matter if it's olive oil, sesame seed oil, it doesn't matter. Oil is the most processed food on the planet. It's the most calorie-dense food on the planet. It does a lot of damage if you're trying to reverse insulin resistance. Refined sugars, obviously those are terrible. And pastries and bread, terrible combination of sugar and fat and salt, and it's never good. So some more pictures of what these meals look like. So we got like a bean stew in the upper right corner. We have some fruit salads. We have like a burger patty. This is the type of colorful, delicious foods that you can absolutely eat in abundance.
Hey guys, in the chat box, can you write whether this food looks appetizing to you? Because, to us it looks very appetizing, and I know to, a significant amount of you guys it does. But if you don't find this food appetizing, you can write the word no. It's totally fine. I'm more curious because it's colorful and it's attractive to us, and I want to see if you feel the same way.
I see yum. I see yes. I see yes with exclamation points. This is good. I'm glad we're on the same page here. It looks delish. Love it. Here's more pictures, guys. And we mean it when we say essentially unlimited quantities of whole fruits. When you're eating the whole fruit, like you see in the picture here, you can have as much as you desire. They are loaded with water content and fiber. It's very, very difficult to eat too much fruit. And you actually reverse insulin resistance while eating the foods you see on the screen right now. Okay, so now that we covered the foods that you eat, like, the nutrition aspect, that it's delicious, it's fun. How does the program work? How do we help you get to the point where you know how to enjoy these foods and you implement it into your life on a daily basis with ease and grace? We've set up a program to teach you how to do this. So we provide 3 powerful tools. So we have a step-by-step online course. That's tool number 1. Then the second tool is a private Facebook group. We're going to go into detail on all 3 of these. And this is where you communicate with us on a daily basis and get an overwhelming amount of support. And then we do Q&A calls. We actually do them twice a month now. So this is where you get to interact with us live and we get to see each other. It's really powerful. So let's go into detail on each one of these. Okay, so the online course. The amount of work that we have put into developing this course is just incredible. We are so proud of this, and it is so thorough. And it's really easy to navigate, super easy to use, works on all devices, and we cover everything. So in core module 1, you get into the welcome, goal setting. We walk you through on a step-by-step manner. We know that lifestyle change can be overwhelming, and we've worked with over 1,000 clients now, and we know that sometimes if you go too fast, it comes back and bites you. So that's why we've specifically designed this in a manner that is sustainable and manageable for everybody. So you go at your own pace. Core module 2, you get into weight loss, calorie density, decision tree, all kinds of really important lessons. And then once you're ready, you move on to core module 3, and we're changing 1 meal at a time. So you change breakfast. Once you master that, then you change lunch. Then once you master that, you change dinner. And you go at your own pace. Sometimes it might take you an extra week or so to master something, and that's okay. There's no stress there. And in core module 4, we talk about intermittent fasting. That's a very, very important lesson right there. Once you're ready, we get into incorporating fitness and building your ideal routine and finding things you love and building it into your life so it lasts long term. And here we get into some strategies for buying food in bulk and saving money, buying at different grocery stores like Costco and wholesale markets is a very important lesson. We teach you how to do that. Social situations, that's such an important aspect of changing your lifestyle. A lot of really great lessons on that in the course. And okay, so, and we're always adding more things to the course. So there's some new, we're in the process of some like batch cooking lessons, how to use an Instant Pot, stuff like that. So it's always growing. And anytime you have a question on any material, you go to the Facebook group. So the Facebook group is, personally, it's my favorite part of the whole program. And this is where we can interact with you on a daily basis. We love it when you post. We love it when you ask questions because we want to answer them. And so this is where you can post pictures of your food and we can see what you're eating. It's one thing for you to tell us what you ate. It's nothing for us to see it and see the ripeness, see the food combination, see the volume on your plate. We want to see what you're doing so we can help you. And so when other community members are doing this, you get recipe ideas, you get inspiration, and it's quite fun. People are sharing what's going on with their blood glucose. Maybe you're just transitioning and you see a high reading and you're concerned. So we want to talk to you about that. Decision tree. This is a really important lesson that helps us quantify exactly what you're doing and help you make adjustments in your routine. Medication reduction. So this is a situation where you can communicate with other people in the group who have already reduced their medication. You can learn from them, and you can figure out how to communicate with your doctor and really get really good insights into how you can get off medications. It's very important. We're not doctors. We can't change your medication, but you can learn a heck of a lot from people who've already done it. Doctor appointment visits. This is something where we can help you prepare for that, or after you've been through a visit, you want to share what your doctor said or what the blood tests are. We communicate through that on the Facebook group. Traveling, you can use the group. Let's say you're going to a restaurant. You don't know what to eat. I love it when people post a menu and we, as a group, we say, hey, what's a good thing to order on that menu? It's quite fun. And just troubleshooting any different kinds. The group is not designed to be classic social media, rainbows and unicorns type of thing. We want to hear from you when you run into challenges. That is part of lifestyle change. Any human being on the planet who has tried to change any habit in their life runs into some speed bumps here and there. That happens. That's real. It's happened to all of us. So having a place to communicate and talk about that is really important. Here's some sample posts here. So, I mean, look at that delicious meal on the left. We have somebody sharing their nutrition software that we encourage you to use and teach you how to use. We have good blood glucose reading there, amazing breakfast, people just sharing their success, feeling amazing. More, so we've got some decision trees here. It's a picture on the right here of Tammy showing how she's been able to climb this pyramid that she wasn't able to do in the past, celebrating that success. And so here's an example of some posts, people asking for support. And that's the whole point. It's a safe place. People post in the Facebook group. The only people that see it are our community, our coaches, our community. It doesn't go to your family. It doesn't go public. It's a safe place. We teach you. If you don't know how to use Facebook, we guide you through that. We help you through that. It's a really, really amazing community. And here we go. Like, you just see post after post after post. Success is highly contagious. When you pop into the Facebook group, hopefully on a daily basis, and see all these vibrant, colorful meals and people saying, oh my gosh, I lost 10 pounds, I'm the best I've ever felt, like, it gets motivating and it starts to rub off on you, and it's amazing. Okay, so here's an example of Bob. You want to tell people about Bob, Cyrus?
Sure. So Bob started watching the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit in February of last year. And he learned a lot from the speakers, from our evidence-based speakers, New York Times bestselling authors, and beyond. And he basically decided that it was time to make lifestyle change happen for himself. So you see him here, picture on the left. He weighed slightly over 300 pounds. He started to eat low-fat, plant-based whole foods. And within an 8-month period, he was able to lose 100 pounds. His fasting glucose went from high 200s all the way down to underneath 100 into the safe zone, into the non-diabetic range. His A1c fell from 9.9 to 5.9. It's fallen further to a 5.3, so he's now technically non-diabetic altogether. His cholesterol fell, his LDL cholesterol fell, his blood pressure fell. He's a new man inside and out. So this is a perfect example of somebody who's very active in our Facebook community, and he's got a wealth of experience, and you'll be able to interact with people like him on a daily basis, and they'll be able to guide you in addition to people on our team.
Okay, and so we do these live Q&A calls. These are so much fun. So we use a software called Zoom, which is really easy to use, and you come in there, and if you want to, you can turn your camera on, or you can not turn your camera on, and we can see you and you can see us, or you can call in with a phone. That's fine too. But it's really fun to have that face-to-face interaction and see each other and talk and communicate with the other members in the group that you've been writing to. It's just really fun. So when you come to these Q&A calls, what type of things do we talk about? Well, an example would be your doctor visits and you're confused and you want to really talk about it, talk it over of how you can communicate. We'll go through that, and we can role play. We can give examples, and other people in the group can chime in and also share things that they've been through. So again, in the Facebook group, we answer questions within 24 hours. So anytime you post a new post, somebody on our team, one of our coaches, me, Cyrus, Kylie, Tara, somebody on our team is going to reply within 24 hours. So we answer your questions, but if you want to do things, more in-depth conversation, that's what we can do on a live Q&A call. And so you get to interact with everybody, and it's really, really fun, and it's like the highlight of our month. We do it twice a month. Okay, so what's the value of this entire online course? So the program that we built with all those modules, all the videos, PDFs, that's worth $1,200 alone. Private Facebook group where you get access to me, Cyrus, Kylie, Tara on a daily basis, every day, 365 days a year. Doesn't matter if it's Christmas, New Year's Day, doesn't matter. We're there. It's at least $1,000. Okay, so adding new material, that's worth at least $1,500. Monthly Q&A video conferences, so the ability to talk to us on those calls, valued at $1,200.
Actually, like Robbie said earlier, this is actually, there's a typo here. This is bi-weekly, so it actually happens twice per month as opposed to once per month.
So you add this up, that's $4,900 for the value of this program. Of course, we're not going to charge that much, so that's a lot. People can't, very few people can afford that. So that's the value. Now, other things involved in what we're talking about today. So we told you in the beginning we're going to have the special webinar bonus. So we're going to throw in today a special bonus of the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit. So we interviewed the best of the best. Look at these pictures. I'm sure many of you people have heard these names. I mean, Dean Ornish, he's known, he's just been all over the place, but he's the President Clinton's doctor, very famous guy. Caldwell Esselstyn, preventing breast heart disease. Michael Greger from Nutrition Facts. Neil Barnard, like the godfather of diabetes health for low-fat plant-based nutrition. Garth Davis, Joel Furman. The experts that we interviewed are top notch. This is an amazing, amazing summit. It's got over 30 hours of interviews. It's incredible. There we go. So we got more pictures here. You can see Michael Clapper in there. You can see Joel Kahn, Michelle McMacken. This is material. We have gotten so much feedback about how this summit has changed people's lives, and really the understanding and the science and the practical application of this diet. The webinar is priceless, and it's part of today's webinar bonus. Okay, so we are throwing in another special bonus today. So some people want a little bit of extra accountability. And so we offer more in-depth coaching. We have small group coaching. So this is where on a weekly basis, you come up and you show up to a meeting. And it's going to be the me or Cyrus on that call. And we talk to you, each person, one-on-one, and really help walk you through the program. Very much so. So this level of accountability and us really checking in with you, where are you at, what are you doing, is the really big added bonus of this. And it's always a smaller group. So on a smaller group, you really get to know each other much more. We start setting up texting buddies, and you really show up week after week, and the progress and the success is really fun. So you're going to get 2 weeks of access to the small group coaching, which costs $250 a month. So this is a really valuable bonus that we're throwing in today. Okay, so if you add it all up with the 2 bonuses, now we're talking about a total value of $5,122. Again, like I said, that's a lot of money. How much does the program actually going to cost? It's going to cost you $249 for the entire year. I mean, guys, it's not a typo. $240 for the entire year. You're going to save 30% off the full price. You're going to get all these bonuses if you sign up for our annual membership, okay? So I'm going to put a button here, and you can sign up by clicking the button on the program, or the button on your screen. Now, again, you sign up for the year, you get access to everything for the entire year. 12 months for one payment of $249, and you get the Mastering Diabetes Summit for life. So you get to take those files, you can download them onto your computer, the video files, the MP3 files. You listen to them while you're on an airplane, while you're driving, while you're doing the laundry. You have them for life. You're going to get 2 weeks of our small group coaching. So those calls are really fun, and we would love to see you joining us.
And just so you guys know, if you click on the offer, which you see on your screen, and it takes you to a checkout page, there's 2 options. You can either purchase the annual subscription for $249 a year, or you can purchase a monthly subscription, which is $29 per month, which is less than $1 a day. So we worked super hard to make this as affordable as possible. We don't want finances to get in the way of you turbocharging your metabolic health. Just to be crystal clear here, if you decide to join the coaching program and you choose the $29 per month option, we will not award you the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit or the small group. If you choose to purchase $49 annual subscription, then you qualify for both small group coaching as well as the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit. So we want to give you guys this information, and the way to do it would be to sign up for the annual membership.
Absolutely. And it's a good commitment. I mean, let's commit to making 2018 the best year yet and get to our best health. I mean, just commit to yourself for the full year. And really, it's an investment in yourself. It's an investment in the most important thing, which is your health. There's nothing more important than your health. So we really hope to see you joining us in the program.
100%. So stop sharing my screen here, and that way we can go to Q&A, and you'll be able to see both Robbie and myself through a lot of the questions. We've been fielding a lot of your questions, and we want to make sure that we can get to them because we know you guys have been super. So let's see what we can do here.
Actually, it's hard to read the comments while I'm talking, but I saw some great comments. Somebody said how they love doing the group intermittent fasting. So that's a fun thing that we do. So people could do it together and sort of get a little camaraderie around that, which is really fun. And I hear Julie saying, I love this program. So thank you, Julie. Really appreciate that. And let's get into some Q&A here.
For sure. Robbie, do you want to turn on your camera so people can see you?
Perfect. There we go.
Beautiful. Okay. Go. Let's take a look at these questions here and see what we got. Okay. So here's a question from here's a question from Margaret. She says, okay, well, what's the best number? What are the best numbers for A1c? So Margaret, your target A1c value is less than 5.7. So really what it's measuring is the total amount of glucose that has bonded to hemoglobin inside of your blood. Don't worry about it. It's overly complicated. But the fact of the matter is you're looking for a number that's underneath 5.7%. And like we were saying earlier, you can get to a number that's less than 5.7 simply by eating a low carbohydrate diet. It's very common. You see people in the low carbohydrate diet world posting all the time that they got an A1c of 4.3, 4.8, 5.1. But what they're not understanding is they're missing the bigger picture, because right now their A1c is controlled, but in the future their A1c is likely to go up, and in the future likely to develop heart disease, cancer, and significantly increase their risk for autoimmunity. So your A1c is important for sure, but your A1c is important in the context of your overall nutrient density. And that's why we suggest eating a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, because the nutrient density is maximized and you can drive your A1c below 5.7.
I love seeing some of these comments coming in. We'll get some of these questions, but Mark says he lost 25 pounds in 1 month. He loves the program. That was terrific. Happy to hear that. Glenna says, great program. Good to see you here, Glenna. You're doing amazing. Can't wait to share your success story real soon. We'll put you in these presentations moving forward. So let's
actually. We were in Glenna does small group coaching, and she was on a video call with myself and Kylie last night. Glenna, if I don't mind bragging on your behalf, Glenna, she's living with type 2 diabetes, and she was using 75 units of insulin per day. 75 units of insulin. That's 45 units of Lantus, which is long-term insulin, and 30 units of short-term insulin per day. She came to our program about at the beginning of, I think, December. So since December to now January, 4th, in a little bit more than 1 month, Glenna has gone from 75 units of insulin all the way down to 0. She no longer takes insulin. And we were talking about this in detail. She's finding that her blood glucose has moved a little bit. At first, her glucose was tanking and she was going hypoglycemic, so she started backing off. And now her glucose is stable somewhere in the low 100s. So she's flatlined her blood glucose, and she's gotten rid of 75 units per day. So Glenna, my hat's off to you. You're following the program brilliantly, and you're a perfect example of someone who gets tremendous benefit and increased insulin sensitivity from following the recommendations that we provide.
Absolutely. And she just wrote that she lost another 12 pounds. So things are going in the right direction. Really happy for you. Okay, so what's the next question we got?
Question. Yosh is also a member of our coaching program. So Yosh, I'm glad to see you in these webinars. He's here all the time, and I love it. His question is, how does a high diet lead to such rapid weight loss? Because I talked about that. So the question is, well, when you're eating a bunch of fat, why do you lose weight in the short term and then gain weight in the long term? I'll tell you exactly why. When you consume, I don't know if, maybe some people in this room have also been in the same situation, but when a diet that is high in fat, you get full quicker. Okay, you eat meat, you eat eggs, you eat dairy products, you eat peanut butter, you eat avocados, you eat things that are coated in essence of fatty acids in your food sends, excuse me, the presence of fatty acid in your food and the presence of fatty acids inside of your digestive system causes your digestive organs to send a signal up to your brain. And they send a signal up to your brain that say, hey, stop eating food. Stop, we're full. There's a lot of calories. And so as a result of that, the more fat-rich foods you put in your mouth, the quicker that signal gets sent up to your brain. And so a lot of people who eat high-fat and or high-protein diets end up not eating as much food because they're just fuller, quicker, and fuller for a longer period of time. So you eat smaller amounts of food, and then de facto, you actually become calorie restricted. So without even trying it, you're eating less calories, and then as a result of that, you end up losing weight. But like we said earlier, high-fat diets cause insulin resistance. They cause atherosclerosis. They cause high cholesterol and hypertension. And in the long term, those problems develop despite the fact that you have calorie restricted yourself, leading to weight loss.
Okay, awesome. So, Ronnie, oh, it says you answered already. Okay, so never mind. Let's see. Coconut oil, is that the type of fat do the same thing to your body as animal-based fat? Cyrus, you want to answer that one? Is coconut oil the same as animal-based fat?
Okay, sorry, which question is that? Read it one time.
Coconut oil, does that type of fat do the same thing to your body as animal-based fat?
Oh, got it. Okay. So the answer is no. So all fatty acids are not created equal. All fat-rich foods are not created equal. If you eat a higher fat diet that's based off of animal products, you will end up consuming a larger proportion of fatty acids as saturated fat. Saturated fat is this fancy, super scientific, nerdy way of referring to fat that can cause, that gets stored inside of your muscle, literally stored inside of your muscle, okay? That's the saturated fat is the one that gets stored inside of your muscle and liver, and that's the stuff that causes long-term metabolic dysfunction. Unsaturated fatty acids, which tend to come more from plant-based foods, don't have nearly that crippling effect. Do they increase your risk for diabetes and insulin resistance? Yes, if they're only eaten in excess. And excess, as far as we're concerned, is anything beyond 15% of total calories. So if you're eating predominantly plant-based fatty acids, you end up actually gaining insulin sensitivity. But as soon as you cross that 15% threshold, then you're in a world of danger. But when you're consuming animal-based fatty acids or animal-based fat-rich foods, that can cause insulin resistance very quickly in a very short period of time with much less intake. And that's the stuff that we're talking about in trying to clear out of your diet so that you can actually end up gaining insulin resistance and gaining insulin sensitivity and reversing insulin resistance altogether. And one last thing, Robbie mentioned earlier that oil is no oil. We do not recommend consuming any oil. Oil is, it has 0 fiber, 0 water, 0 vitamins, 0 minerals, 0 antioxidants, very little phytochemicals, no protein, no carbohydrates. So it is a pure fat. And as a result of consuming that, you end up increasing your risk for atherosclerosis, heart disease, coronary artery disease, Alzheimer's disease, insulin resistance, cancer, you name it. So coconut oil, olive oil, canola oil, they all fall into that category. And I would say big no-no. Stay away from that altogether.
Excellent. Okay, so somebody said I just had my first C-peptide test, and the result was 1.8. What does that mean for my pancreas and insulin production? So,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Cyrus.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, 1.8 is, depending on the reference range, in most cases, that's good. 1.8 should be fine. That's a fasting test. But again, the C-peptide result, and we need to know, are you living with, why don't you tell us if you're still here? Are you living with type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, not type 1? I assume type 2 at that point. You wouldn't probably not be a type 1.5. So if you're living with type 2 diabetes and your C-peptide is 1.8, there's a very good chance that if you follow a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, you can get off medication. That's a good sign. Somebody just said type 2. That's a good sign that you're producing plenty of insulin. And people ask that a lot. Hey, can I get off my medications? Can I get off my medications? Can I get off insulin like Lena did? The best way to know is to apply the program. Go in, get to a place of 100% compliance. Maybe you can jump in right away. Maybe you have to build up to that. but somehow, some way, get to the point where you are doing this program 100% compliant, string together 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and see what happens.
Okay, so here's another question. Kathy, she asked a brilliant question. She says, all right, guys, the title of your webinar is how do I reduce my A1c in the next 60 days? I don't think you answered my question. How do I reduce my A1c in the next 60 days? Okay, so Kathy, I'm glad you asked that question because we answered it by answering, by giving you the big picture, but the answer is this. The way that you reduce your A1c over the course of the next 60 days is to adopt a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, just like Robbie said, very compliant. Adopt a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet that has less than 15% of total calories from fat, as few animal-based products as possible. And as a result of that, what will happen to you, what is likely to happen to you, is exactly what's happening to Glenna, is exactly what happened to Bob, what happened to Lindsay, what happened to Carrie Kennedy, what happened to Patricia, okay? You end up losing weight, you end up reversing insulin resistance, you end up dropping your blood glucose, your average blood glucose value, which then drops your A1c, okay? It's really, sometimes Robbie and I kind of joke around with each other because we're like, hey, the system is actually not that complicated. It's a relatively straightforward process, but there's so many subtle nuanced details in the process of adopting a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. And that's why the need for a coaching program was born. So what we do is we provide you with the information plus the support, plus the ability to contact our team, which no other coaching program in the world of diabetes has as comprehensive support as we have. So point being, it's not that complicated from a biological perspective. What gets complicated is the logistics. How do I do it? When do I eat? When do I time my insulin? How often do I check my blood glucose? What do I do? How do I communicate with my doctor? How do I reduce my medication use? Those are the things that our coaching program is specifically designed to teach you.
Yes, the nuances, the details. That's what we're here to help people work through.
Absolutely.
Okay, what else do we have here?
Here's a question from Caleb. Can I join this program if I am non-diabetic and I just want to learn? My fiance has type 1 diabetes and isn't really motivated on her own. Caleb, I love the fact that you just asked that question. The answer is 100%. We got a lot of people in our coaching program who don't have diabetes. We have a lot of medical professionals who come to us to learn insulin resistance and learn how to gain insulin sensitivity. We have family members. We have fiancés. We have boyfriends, girlfriends, you name it. So the answer is yes. Please, if you're interested in joining, I highly recommend it. You can go through the process and learn, inspire and motivate your fiance, and hopefully, they will also want to make some changes as well. And if it's something you want to do, we're here to support you 100%.
Absolutely. There's nothing better than leading by example. Nothing better. Cool. All right.
Okay. So Julie asks, can these studies be posted in the Facebook group so I can read and reference them to my keto friends? Okay. Julie, I was on a webinar with the ACLM, which is the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So that's kind of the big governing board here of lifestyle change. And they featured, me as the speaker, and I got bombarded. I got something like 65 emails after that webinar of medical professionals, doctors, nurses, certified diabetes educators saying, I want to see the research. And I was like, great, no problem. So I put together a document that has 108 references. And those 108 references I can absolutely send to you. Here's what I want you to do. In the chat box right now, put your email address, okay? If you type in your email address right after this webinar, I'll send you those 108 references. Go to town on those. Read them yourself. Send them to your friends. Pay attention to it because it is no joke, and it can hopefully give you the research backing that you're looking for.
Terrific. Let's see here. What else do we got? Cyrus, why don't you go ahead and answer the protein question?
Okay, which one is it? How many grams of protein you shoot per day?
Yeah, and another one says, Ruth says, my functional doctor said I can't get enough protein with plants. Must eat meat or fish.
Ooh, good question. Okay, so Ruth says, my doctor says I can't get enough protein without eating animal-based products. And then Nancy says, how many grams of protein is it necessary to eat per day? Okay, so let's talk about protein for a second, because protein is a very misunderstood topic.
Hold on one second. Let me stop you real quick. Guys, people are putting in their email in the chat box. Here's what's going to happen. After this webinar, you always get a link. You get an email. You will get an email from us. Just reply to that email. And
actually,
I would like the studies.
You know what I can do? Right, sorry, let me back up here. We're trying to like bombard our team with too many emails. In that email that you will receive after the webinar, we will give you a link to download references.
There you go. Everybody on the webinar, everybody here is going to get a link. Don't paste your email in here. We already got your email.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So the answer, let's talk about protein, because protein is misunderstood. Okay. We've been told for the longest time that protein stabilizes your blood glucose, that protein, you have to eat a large amount of protein in order to be an athlete, that you got to eat protein. Otherwise, if you don't, you're going to waste away and it's going to lead to disease down the road. Okay. Food manufacturers created the protein hype. Food manufacturers perpetuate the protein hype. Food manufacturers are aware that if they create a package, they create a product, and on the product they write the word protein somewhere on the label, they will increase their sales by something like 60% just with one word on the label. Food manufacturers are well aware of this, and they use it to basically create more demand for their products. Okay, when it really boils down to it, number one, the way to calculate your total protein needs is to take your body weight in pounds and multiply it by 0.3. 0.3. Let's do an example. I weigh 160 pounds. If you take the number 160 and you multiply that by 0.3, that gives you 48. 48 is the total number of grams of protein that my body, from a biological perspective, needs on a daily basis in order to operate normally. So as long as I consume 48 grams of protein, I'm in the clear. Now, one other thing that most people don't ever talk about is the fact that your body recycles amino acids from protein. So what that means is that every second of every day, tissues are breaking down cells and cells are committing suicide. And the protein that's found inside of those cells doesn't just end up in your urine. You don't poop it away. It ends up getting recycled. So if you have cells that are breaking down from your liver and from your thyroid gland and from your brain and from your skin, those amino acids actually end up contributing to what's called your overall amino acid pool. And your overall amino acid pool on a 24-hour basis is approximately 30 grams. So what that means is that there's 30 grams of degraded protein from just living that ends up becoming available to tissues after those cells have been destroyed. So the 48 number that I just gave you is in addition to the 30 that's already being recycled inside of your body on a daily basis. So even though your overall protein intake doesn't actually need to be that large, the reason for that is because you're actually capable of reusing protein from damaged and degraded cells. So keep that in the back of your mind. That's number one. And then number two, the question was, my doctor said I can't get enough protein unless I eat meat. That is just a false statement. I don't know how else to say it. It is a false statement altogether. Your total protein needs are actually quite low. And this concept that you got to be eating animal-based proteins in order to actually maximize your total body health is not evidence-based. It's never been an evidence-based methodology. And the research actually shows that the more animal-based products you consume, the higher your risk for metabolic disease, the higher your risk for diabetes mortality, the higher your risk for cardiovascular mortality, and the higher your risk for premature death from any cause, period. So if somebody continually tells you you have to eat animal-based products in order to, be quote-unquote healthy, the answer is it's hogwash. It's just not true. It's just not a true statement at all. And I hate to be so blunt about it, but that's the truth.
Yeah, I just want to add to this, that summit that we told you guys about that you get as a bonus for signing up for the yearly program. We have a great interview with Garth Davis in there. He wrote a book called Proteinaholic. I mean, this stuff we're talking about here, it's not stuff that we made up. We are so proud of our program being evidence-based. We're not teaching you something that worked for me and Cyrus, so then you guys should do it too. This is evidence-based science we're talking about here. This is facts. This protein stuff is just complete garbage from a factual standpoint. So, and like Garth Davis has so many lectures from so many experts in our summit covering all kinds of, pretty much, I mean, all these questions we've answered, going even more depth, scientific answers. It's just really valuable stuff.
100%. There's no question about it. And again, you'll be able to, if you take a look at those references that we'll send out after the webinar, you'll be able to see it for yourself. So don't take my word for it. Don't take Robbie's word for it. Take the researcher's word for it. Take Dr. Neil Barnard's word for it. Take Dr. Michael Greger's word for it. Take Dr. Garth Davis's word for it and beyond. Okay? It's very, very, very well described at this point. Okay. So Derek asked a question. He says, with regards to type 1, have you ever heard of beta cells regenerating insulin production? Or have you ever seen that beta cell antibodies go down over time? The answer is it depends. It depends on when you catch this problem. Okay. So if you were diagnosed, Derek, with type 1 diabetes a month ago, or within the last 6 months, let's say, what that means is that your beta cell functionality is on a decline. Okay, what that means is that you're producing less and less and less insulin over the course of time. Your beta cells are dying over the course of time, and you're typically on a downward slope. At that point, if you're able to catch it early and switch over to eating a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet, we have seen, and Dr. Furman has also, he told us this in our small conversation, that he has seen that process stabilize, and people don't necessarily lose any more beta cell functionality. Whether they increase their beta cell functionality or not is still up for debate. That's kind of an individual process. But the idea is that if you catch it early and you act early, you can make some serious positive change. If you're like Robbie and myself, who have been living with type 1 diabetes now for anywhere from 12 years to 15 years, okay? Him and I, in our transition to low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition, we don't stand a chance. We don't stand a chance from the current medical paradigm. We don't stand a chance at increasing beta cell production, beta cell insulin production. So if it were possible, that would be great. The last thing I will add to that is that Dr. Walter Longo out of USC has published many papers and a book about a particular type of diet called the fasting mimicking diet, the FMD. And the fasting mimicking diet is it's a way of sort of integrating intermittent fasting into your regimen, and he has shown that the fasting mimicking diet is actually capable of increasing insulin production. So this is something that's kind of relatively new, and it's something that I'm trying to learn a little bit more about myself. But I would say, the main focus is that if you catch it early, yes. If you catch it late, it's a lot more difficult. Okay, here's another question. Julia says, when you say you use only 25 units of insulin per day, is that Lantus or Novolog? The answer, Julia, to your question is that 25 is total. So personally, I use 11 units of Lantus, approximately 14 units of Humalog on a daily basis. So 11 plus 14 gives you roughly 25 units per day. And again, the amount of insulin that I'm using is not as important as the ratio of carbohydrate to insulin. So if I was using 25 units of insulin, but I was eating 50 grams of carbohydrate, that's a 2-to-1 ratio. I'm using 25 units of insulin, and I'm eating 900 grams. So you do the math on that, that gives you a 36-to-1 ratio. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Julia, another Julia, maybe the same Julia, asked how many days a week do you encourage fasting? There's two paradigms that we encourage. Number one is either a once per week 24-hour intermittent fast, or the second one is a daily 16-8 intermittent fast. Either way, you can get some significant results. It comes down to what are you willing to do. If you're willing to do a 16-8 daily fast, you'll get tremendous results. If you're willing to only try a once per week 24-hour intermittent, you can still get results. It'll just be a little bit longer.
Kathy asks, can we go to online learning at any pace? Yes, you get to, it's self-paced program. You get to go through it as you see fit, And we encourage you to do it slowly. We encourage you to changing lifestyle habits is not easy. It's just not. There's always challenges. And when you try and bite off more than you can chew, you can use some motivation in the beginning. We see people get through it, amazing results, 1-2 months, and then they crash. And that's the last thing we want, because you put in all that effort and then you crash, and it's frustrating for anybody who has to go through that. So we really encourage slow and steady. It's a fundamental lesson in the beginning. And so you get access to the course. Hopefully when you invest for the entire year, you get that time. So you basically can go through at your own pace. So it's self-paced.
Absolutely. We actually encourage you to take it slowly. Absolutely. Because another thing that can happen, which we sort of haven't emphasized too much, is that a lot of people find that when they adopt a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet the way that we recommend, that their insulin use comes down so quickly and so dramatically that you can end up driving yourself hypoglycemic. So if you inject insulin, then we absolutely recommend please walk. Do not run. Because if your insulin use falls very quickly and you don't respond by giving yourself less insulin, you can actually become dangerously hypoglycemic and end up going to the hospital. And obviously we don't want that, and you don't want that. So it's very important living with type 1 to do it slowly, but also with type 2, sustainability is the key. Sustainability is 100% the key. So I'd rather you take literally 6 months to change your lifestyle rather than trying to do it all in a month and then win a speed record. Doesn't make any sense.
Somebody asked, Robbie, how long does it take to clear your skin? So when I started eating a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, I saw improvements in my skin literally within weeks, and then acne clearing up, months probably. I can't say I remember exactly, but the results are pretty darn quick. Like, you start getting a sort of vibrancy that happens when you get rid of these products, these animal products and processed foods. It's just not helping anybody. Like Cyrus said earlier, this program really is. It's really the simplest thing ever. Like, it's incredibly simple, but implementing it is like the hardest thing ever. Like, it's a very, very unique thing. But yeah, skin can clear up pretty quickly. And again, I love when people ask these questions, because really the truth is it's different for every person, and there's only one way to find out. And it's a fun process to find out. It's to try it. It's to do it. And you will get benefits. I mean, there's no question. Like, how quick? I mean, I don't know yet. Let's try it. Let's do it together. It's a fun party. Let's go.
I mean, I'll tell you this. When I first made the transition, I was under the guidance of a nutrition guru who basically was telling me, he's like, all right, just watch. Please monitor your insulin use very carefully. So I made an overnight switch. I went from eating a lower carbohydrate diet with a bunch of animal-based products to low-fat plant-based whole foods overnight. Within 24 hours, my insulin use was dropped by about 5 units per day. Within the next 24-hour period, I was cut by another 5 units per day. By the first week, I had dropped my insulin use by more than 30% in 7 days. And I'm sitting there scratching my head, and I'm like, how is this even possible? It doesn't make any sense. I'm eating 5 times the carbohydrate, and my insulin use just got cut by 30%. What is happening? And then at that point, I put myself back to school to learn the whole process, and it became obvious at that point. But just like Robbie's saying, the speed at which it happens in your body is probably different than what happened in my body. I'm not going to lie. But most of the time, people find that they actually start changing quicker than they might think. And as a result of that, they end up, having a lot of fun in this process. Elaine asked a question. She says, will I not become insulin sensitive until I reduce my body fat? I'm currently at 36.5%, and I want to lose about 15 to 20 pounds. So the answer is yes and no. If you lose weight, you are likely to become much more insulin sensitive. True statement, no question about it. But you can actually gain insulin sensitivity without losing a single pound. I wrote an article on that, and the article exists on the Mastering Diabetes website, and it basically teaches you that weight loss is helpful but not required. In the same way that intermittent fasting is helpful but not required to maximize your insulin sensitivity. Simply by migrating towards a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet and doing it according to the recommendations that we provide you, you can gain insulin sensitivity without losing a single pound. And there's actually evidence-based research to show you this. Back in 1972, Dr. James Anderson at Montreal University showed this for the first time, where he literally force-fed his patients. He said, I'm going to feed you as many beans and lentils and potatoes and squash and corn and bananas that you want. You are not allowed to lose a single pound. If you lose a single pound, I'm going to kick you out of my study. And people were like, okay. So he force-fed them to the point where they were like uncomfortably full. And they were like, oh God, I can't eat any more food. And he was like, don't lose any weight. And despite that, he took people who had been on insulin for, I kid you not, 30 years. People who were injecting insulin for 30 years, and he got them off of insulin in 30 days. They didn't lose a single pound, and they got off insulin in a month after having been on it for 30 years. So this stuff is very powerful. Okay, we're not making any of this stuff up. This is all evidence-based, and you can see the effects happening in your body in a very short period of time.
Emma says, I've dropped mine by 67% with your program. I assume you're talking about insulin there.
Who said that?
Emma said that.
Emma, nice work, Emma.
Yeah, love it. I'm just going to do a fire around here for some of these things I see coming in here. What do you think of vegetable juice? Well, it spikes glucose. So juicing greens is okay. Again, we're still encouraging you rather have whole foods. Rather have you eat salad and chew those greens. There's one exception there. If you want a straight celery juice, can be very medicinal. That's a morning thing that some people can do to help fight some viral issues. But other than that, it's best to chew your greens. Now, vegetable juice, if you're going to juice carrots, you're going to juice beets, that's going to cause some blood glucose problems. Again, taking out the fiber is just not a good idea. Let's see. Okay, somebody asked about decision trees. It's a very important lesson. We actually have a video about why it's so important, and Tara put a link in there. You can also find it. You can just Google,
they asked, do you still use them?
Oh, do I still use them? Oh.
Or she said, do you still use them, or are you so good that it's second nature?
Julia is by far the most prolific question asker in this webinar. Love it. It's awesome. So she's basically saying, hey, Cyrus and Robbie, are you still filling out decision trees? Do you need to do that for the rest of your life, or can you just do it for a little bit of time? The answer is, Julia, we want you to fill out the fewest number of decision trees you can possibly fill out in order to get full control over your blood glucose. So if it takes you a week and you have full insight into what's happening, great, do it for a week. If it takes you, 2 months to get that process under control, do it for 2 months, right? In my particular situation, I had to do it for about a month and a half, like every single day to really understand what was happening. And then at that point, I was like, okay, cool, I can relax a little bit. I know Robbie has taken a much more aggressive approach, and he had filled out the decision tree every single day for 365 days. That's some serious commitment, right? So, again, fill it out as few times as is necessary to really get full 100% insight into what's happening with your blood glucose.
Yeah, decision trees are a pain in the butt. And our goal is to get you to a place where you have, we have this concept of go-to meals, the stuff we cover on our course, where things are predictable and consistent and you don't have to rely on them. I mean, can they be nice? Can you dial things in a little more when you do? I mean, sure. But we don't want you to be dependent on them. That's key. You do not need to be dependent on them. That's essential.
Absolutely. So Cynthia asked a question. She says, how do I know if Christina says, how do I know if I'm insulin resistant? Christina, here's how you determine whether you're insulin resistant. The easiest way is to take what's called an oral glucose tolerance test, okay? An oral glucose tolerance test is a fancy test that you can take when you go to the doctor. What they do is they give you a glass, and in that glass, it's got a bunch of sugar water dissolved in it. So it's 75 grams of glucose dissolved in water. You shoot it. They test your blood glucose before and then every 30 minutes for the next 2 hours. And then they graph it, and they take a look at how high your blood glucose went and then whether it came back down to normal. And based off of the shape of that curve, they can determine whether or not you have insulin resistance. We love the test, except we hate the fact that it uses sugar water. Instead of doing that, you can literally, if you're living with type 1 diabetes, you can basically consume 2 bananas, which is approximately three bananas, which is approximately 75 grams of carbohydrate, and then monitor your blood glucose curve over the course of time. If you're living with type 2 diabetes, you can do the same thing and monitor your blood glucose curve over the course of time. And it's an imperfect, but it is an indicator of how insulin resistant you are. The higher your blood glucose goes, the more insulin resistance you're living with. The flatter that curve, the less insulin resistance you're living with.
Love it. Okay. Betty says lowering insulin requirement would probably pay for the program. You know, for $249 for an entire year, I'm telling you, with medication reduction, you know, I mean, sick time. I mean, this is the return on this investment is objectively is actually like financially good, but then like there's the priceless aspects of just feeling good, you know? So we hope you guys join us. We really, really do. We feel really good about the value of this program. Let me put it that way.
I'm wondering, can I share my screen again? Because I was actually just doing this calculation in my head yesterday, just out of pure coincidence. I was like, I wonder how many dollars I've saved on insulin per year, right? So let me run you through the math here because I think it's actually pretty fascinating. I used to use 42 units of insulin per day. I now use 25 units of insulin per day. So I'm basically saving approximately 17 units of insulin per day. Okay, so if you take 17 and you multiply that by 365, that is 6,200 units of insulin per year. Okay, and that's equal to six and a half vials of insulin. I'll call it 6 vials of insulin. 6 vials of insulin at $300 per vial is $1,800. So in 1 year, I saved $1,800 just by using 17 units less insulin per day. And now that I've been doing this for 14 years, 1,800 times 14, I've saved $25,200. That's simple.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yep.
Guys, I want to say this has been super fun. You guys have been really interactive. We appreciate that. Lots of questions, and we really, really hope to see you in our coaching program. Like I said, like we are there in that Facebook group answering questions within 24 hours, every day of the year, no exceptions. We're there. We love this. Our team loves it, and it's just our passion to be here and support you guys. So the online course is incredible. The live Q&A calls are just like this, and we just go on and on and on those. And we also have these special bonuses tonight. So you sign up, you get the summit, which is incredible. It's over 30 hours of incredible content. And then you get the 2 weeks of small group coaching, which is really, really fun. We love those. And we hope to see you there. So it's been really fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Rishi. I hope you got a lot of value out of this, and we will see you on the inside.
Bye, everybody.